I have a full group of people today, so it's not going to be just a one-on-one. So I'm very, very excited to welcome this very motivated group. So I'm not even sure where we're going to even start. So whoever would like to start talking about, what are you all doing right now?
We are helping people become their best selves through training and coaching and facilitating speaking, storytelling, thinking for people's ideas and getting their selves out there. I mean, we are passionate that everyone has that opportunity to do so.
And I know, Ruth, for you, this is a long time road you've gone down, because you have been involved with, TEDx and definitely teaching people how to speak for TEDx and other presentations and things like that. So it's kind of just another step in your journey.
Yeah, we're delighted to have Blythe and Acacia as a full part of our articulation team, and it wouldn't be what it is today without them. So we're all individually working hard with people, one-on-one and groups, and we're working together as a team to lift each other up as well. And I don't mean that in sort of a touchy-feely way. I mean, we are doing that all of the time. So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And Blythe and Acacia, have you? How did you get connected with Ruth? Let's start there. You guys can just.
Well, I think my first connection with Ruth was through TEDx. My husband, Matt Slaybaugh, was the very first person to take the TEDx Columbus stage way back in.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. Was that like 2010, Ruth?
2009.
2009. So it was in 2009. So that was how I first got to know Ruth. But I mean, I could tell a long story here. But really how I got wrapped up in articulation and working with Ruth started in 2016 when I left my training and development career in the retail sector and was striking out on my own as a coach. And when Ruth and I met and talked, it just felt sort of meant to be, because I've always been a communicator. I'm also a theater artist, a director, and writer now, and actor in the theater. And so, yeah, being able to
that's like a today-year-old title.
Yeah, the writer part is brand new with the theater part. So yeah, I was always doing communicating in my second career as an artist, and then training in my primary career. So to bring those together at Articulation has just been, I don't know, I feel very whole now as a person. There's not separate parts of me anymore.
Okay, Blythe, how about you?
Through Acacia. New Acacia as a performer.
Get a little closer to your microphone.
I met a new Acacia as a theater performer, and in 2019 she asked me to come audition for a show which she was directing, and so Acacia directed me in 2019, and in 2022, when I was sort of casting about for my next move, I happened to be Matt Slaybaugh is going to get another mention. I happened to be in a Vistage group with Matt Slaybaugh at that point, and he happened to know some inside dish on what was going on at Articulation, and we had coffee, and he said, there's this job that you might be perfect for. And I went home from that coffee and I polished up my resume and I sent it off to Acacia, and shortly thereafter I met Ruth, and Ruth and I have had a lot of intersections in our lives. And so the fact that we had never met in person before, much like you and I, Catherine, like the fact that we had never met before, it was kind of wild, a lot of synchronicity. And so it felt, I think, like a very natural fit to join this team of communicators. I also, per being in a show that Acacia directed, I also have a performance and theater background, a teaching background, an English background. So it was a very natural fit for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
You guys just feel like you're totally custom fit to do what you're doing right now. And like I said, I'm definitely going to dig into some of that backstory. But let's talk about who might be an ideal client for Articulation.
Well, it depends upon who you ask.
Well, I'll give everybody an opportunity.
Well, I'll start. Everyone knows my favorite client is a group of people in front of a consequential moment where they're defending their ideas, their business contracts, and there's a lot riding on it. And I just love what I call the squat meets the sprint. You have to use all your muscles at once and go really fast. That happens to be my favorite niche, but I know Acacia and Blythe have others, so I'll let them go.
Yeah, so I would say my niche is I really love working with groups, typically smaller groups, like anywhere from 6 to 20 people, helping them to learn together, because I like facilitating those conversations and helping people to learn from each other's experiences to become great communicators, because they find they're not alone in that process. They're not alone in their struggles, and they actually have the resources at their disposal to be their best communicator self.
I love that because I do think sometimes people think like I'm a terrible communicator, not realizing that, you know what, you do talk.
We'll
You
talk.
wanna
We'll talk
ask
about
for
that.
things.
We'll dig into that with you, Kathy.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, yeah, you're not alone. It's just a matter of how you do it or how much practice you might need
Yeah.
with that too. So I love that group idea. That's really kind of
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
They might take a totally different approach and say, I really love working with the individual. Now, I do love the small groups, like the 6-person groups. But what I really love is taking those people, once they've learned their information together, and getting into their really specific needs and what they need to improve and be better. And even more specialized, I'm loving the nonprofit sector, the nonprofit individual right now, particularly the nonprofit executive. And that links to a program that we just launched specifically for nonprofit leaders.
I love that also too, because they have some of the best stories, and they are probably not fully effective in getting them out, because there's been many times where I've met people and I hear the whole story and I'm like, how did I not know that about your organization? Because either, marketing is an issue, or again, communication could be an issue. And if you have a front person that can really do a great job telling the story, then that could be the game changer for them. All right, so I have a rumor that you all have written a book.
So we should show.
It's an
Okay, so show your.
Yeah.
Show your.
It's the Motivated Speaker.
The title is
Motivated Speaker. And I should say, you should say we accidentally wrote a book. That was not what we intended to do.
Well, how did this come about then? There's definitely a story there then.
Well, I'll start with the spark moment, and I'll try to make it brief. I was at a Miami University event. I gave a talk. The woman that followed me was the head of the writing center at Miami. Her name is Elizabeth Wardle. And she talked about how everyone is a writer, and talked about how she has transformed. She wouldn't say this because you don't call yourself a genius, but she is a genius, truly. Transforming how we teach people how to write. And she talked about these threshold concepts, which are things you have to understand in order to do something well. You could do something, but you may not do it well unless you understand these concepts. We'll talk about that in a second. So I sat in the audience and I thought, who's done this for writing or speaking? Who's actually decided or defined, or rather named, the concepts that you need to understand in order to be a great speaker? And so I said to her, will you do a workshop with us, and will you walk us through how to figure this out? And so the three of us went to Miami for a day, and she did a workshop just for the three of us. And then we went back to her several times and started writing and iterating and brainstorming. And then we started blogging and posting them on LinkedIn. By the time we were all finished with that, we were like, wait a minute, we wrote a lot. Like 25 or 30,000 words, a lot.
Wow.
And while a book is double that was a lot for us. And so that's kind of, I'll let Acacia pick up, or Blythe, from there, sort of what we did next, because it's the journey of the book.
Well, what I would add into the beginning of the journey as well, and why I think it worked so well, in my experience creating art and creating 36 original shows, typically the best stuff starts out with questions, and questions that you don't know the answer to, I think, make the best art. And so, as Ruth pointed out, the process started really with us having questions to become better coaches and trainers for our speakers. And if we could identify these threshold concepts, maybe we could do better for the people that we help. And after we had all of this content put together, we'd gone through the process to figure out what we think they are. We'd debated. There was so much fruitful friction, good things that were happening with us when we were trying to figure out how we would define these threshold concepts, that by the time we had this content that we'd been putting out online, we totaled it up, and it was like, I think originally, Ruth, you counted like 20,000 words or something.
About 25,000.
Yeah.
So what did we, so pick us up there. What did we do when we realized we had 25,000 words?
Essentially, you went into the woods and created a backbone, right? The structure. So you disappeared to your cabin and did some writing. And what Ruth did then was she connected all the dots for us, because we had these pieces and parts that were really, really good and useful content. There's that really word. And
I really like that word.
We're really working on getting rid of it too.
And we needed as I said, the backbone that connected all the parts and pieces, the nerve center to bring it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Acacia, then I'll give a nod. Acacia and Blythe, what I was looking for them to say was that we started then curating stories, because what was missing was sort of lifting up all these thresholds in real person, first person experiences that we'd had with clients. Like, where did we see that happen, and what happened to that person, and how did they come out of it? And what we realized at the end of the day was when somebody called us with a problem, and this was when we really knew, like, okay, this was it. When somebody called us with a problem, we'd say, they're missing one of these. And we kept testing that over and over again. And once we figured out that, like, okay, they all fit in one of these 6, we were sort of done. Like, that was, we knew that we'd reached the sort of pinnacle of defining, rather naming them. They've been around forever. We didn't discover them, by the way. These things happen all the time. But putting them in an organization so somebody can say, if I want to be a great speaker, here's 6 things I need to be able to understand in order to do that. And so then we launched it to a publisher, just like, oh, let's give it a try.
Let's just see what happens.
And a week later, we had a contract. And now everyone's like, really? Is that really what happened?
Here it happens. You're like the second person I know that's happened, but I mean, that's only the second person.
Well, we had 3 things going for us. One, there are 3 of us, and it does matter about reach. The second is our timing was impeccable. They were looking for one more title for spring. And the third was, by that time in September, the book was like at almost 35,000 words, and it was nearly done. So we had a month of work to do. They said, you can have the contract if you can finish it by November 1st. And we finished it by November 10th. So we kind of met their expectations, and that was, and then we looked back and said, oh my gosh, we wrote a book.
One more really important piece to that, where they said, we don't have any books like this. So the concept, the idea of the threshold concepts of being a better communicator, it's kind of new and fresh, and Wiley didn't have anything like that.
Yeah, I was going to make the comment too that I don't think, I mean, you see books about, communication and things like that, but something this specific is, I have not necessarily seen so much.
The key difference, Catherine, is so many of those books are about communications, like the thing that you're communicating. And this is really about the communicator, and thinking really holistically about how do you become a great communicator, no matter the mode of your communication, no matter the situation you're put in, no matter your audience. What do you really need to carry with you from experience to experience to connect all those dots?
So it's a great examination of you're the problem.
And the solution. And the solution.
Not at all. It's
Solution too.
It's what are those things that you need to do that you just didn't know? I mean, that's really what we're,
Absolutely. And we sometimes get a little lost because, how could you know everything? But to have somebody who, or 3 people in this case, that can really lay out to you, you know what, you're missing this one thing. And if you had this one thing, that's going to be the game changer for you. So that's what makes this really kind of unique. So what, somebody buys your book, what would you like them to, how would you like them to react to it once they're done? Like, I've read the book and
I want them to find the one thing that they aren't doing, because there's something in there. Every speaker isn't doing one thing, and it's different for everyone. And I'll give, because we're storytellers, I'll give a 2-sentence example. Larry Smith, who you know. Do you remember Larry? The 6-word memoir guy?
Yes.
Lived in Columbus for a while, became really close friends with us. We sent him an early edition. And he wrote back, he goes, when you forced me to listen to myself when he gave a TEDx talk 10 years ago, I didn't want to do it. It was the worst thing I could have ever imagined. And when I did it, I was transformed on the other side. I knew what I needed to do to improve. And that's what we're talking about. They become sticky. You can't unsee them. They're troublesome. They're like, they're also recursive. Every time you do it, you learn something new. And so that's what Larry experienced when we forced him into listening to a recording of himself, which he still talks about how horrible it was, but on the other side, it was great. So that's what we want people to walk away from, is go find the one thing that you may not be practicing doing or understanding, and find it inside the book. We can't tell you what that is unless you pay us, and then we'll tell you.
Exactly. And that's what's really great about books like this too, is that, you know, you might know, I definitely need some help in this area. Let me just read the book. And this could be my fix, or I need to call you guys personally and really kind of help me get through this, because in many cases, you know, how many times do we know what we're doing wrong? And I always use diets as the example. It's like, well, I know what I'm supposed to eat, but what I really need is someone to walk around and knock the food out of my hand. And this could operate just like that. Read the book, and if you can't,
and I'll say
yourself.
that you know, I have the latest textbook on public speaking that's being used in classrooms today. You could pull that off the shelf, but it is not user friendly for an adult in a working environment that has to like look at, you know, there's tips and checklists and things that are embedded in there. It is not just a theoretical book at all. And so we wanted to blend it with sort of, if you had to check off all the 27 different skills you needed, that's also in there. Mm-hmm. Like specifically, what are the things that you have to learn, not just how do you think about learning them.
Yeah, and storytelling is key too. The fact that you guys included some stories, I think, makes it really relatable, because you could be thinking of like, all right, I got to practice this, but you're like, then you start seeing people, yourself in the people that you're writing about, and that's where you start making the connection. So I love that you chose to do that.
Our graphic artist, Alan Jazak, who was a very big part of our growing up as a mature company over the last 20 years, read it, and he's like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. And that story, oh yeah, now I mean, he had all these sort of revelations, and it was another proof point for us that we wrote it in a way that feels very accessible and like very personal, but we don't name names really. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that everyone's safe.
Yeah.
You anonymize. But Catherine, you bring up a really good point. We use stories to communicate where we've seen these things happen before and to give examples. But this is not a book about storytelling, which is so much a part of our coaching practice, because we do feel like the storytelling book has been done well. And so we really wanted to make sure we were focused solely on the person doing the communicating.
Yeah, it's kind of like that missing link that some of these other books probably could have done, but no, you did it first. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Start with you, because my next question is, what did you do as a kid for fun? We kind of got a glimpse of what some of your passions are, but just to set the stage for everyone, it is summer and your feet hit the ground. You have no responsibility. What was the thing that you would do?
So I was thinking about this morning, and there were three things that I did. I would read a lot on my own. I would go outside and play. We had a great neighborhood of kids, particularly when I was very small. Mm-hmm. And my brother is 3 years older than I am. And we had a bunch of neighbors with kids. And it was sort of like the proverbial come back when the streetlights go on. Right. But we were always in shouting distance of the house as well. And then the third thing I did was I really leaned into performance in lots of different ways. Like I had access to it at school. I had access to it at summer camp. I was very, very fortunate. But I would also do it on my own. I would sort of like act things out or take what I had seen outside the house and bring it back to the house in a little performance all my own. I was doing ballet at the time as well. And I remember like reading this book about the Nutcracker and really taking on the persona of Clara, or some versions called her Maria, and what that looked like. I was also obsessed with Judy Garland as a child, and so I would mimic her. I mean, the younger Judy Garland, right?
Yeah.
Like the Meet Me in St. Louis and the Mickey Rooney movies, that sort of
Right,
thing.
right.
So I would imitate her around the house, and we would sing, and I would perform around the house, and that's what I did for fun.
Acacia?
You're going to hear some similar threads with Blythe.
That's okay.
I was
That's how you guys all got together, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was and remain I was an expressive child. I remain an expressive adult. So I was thinking about this, and my brother would tell you that even from the time I could start to like form stories as a kid, I would tell stories about when I was a grandma. And my brother would go crazy at the dinner table. He was like, "You were not ever a grandma. You can't tell a story about when you were a grandma." But I was really imaginative. And I remember I would play pretend if I was home alone. Sometimes I'd pretend I was on a talk show, or I would pretend that I was doing something else, like performing usually. I was a dancer, and so there was the constant sound of my thumping feet in the house. As I was dancing around the house, I would put on records like Strauss waltzes are a significant memory of dancing to Strauss waltzes around the house. I just really had and continue to have a real desire to be expressive and to have someone feel like they understand me. And I think that a lot of people have that desire buried in them. They just want to feel like someone hears them and understands them.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Ruth?
Well, I couldn't have had a more different childhood than the two of them. While I went to a lot of theater and music growing up as requirements for school, when you say like, what did I do, running in? Well, I would run in from a summer day having played 5 hours of tennis, which is what I did from the age of 11 on, from noon to 6 every day. That's what I did. And you can see that in my passion for pickleball now.
I was going to ask about that.
Totally. When I learned 5 years ago, exactly, I was like, I'm missing this. It's another story about sports. But I would come in and I would wait for my father to come in from the car because he was listening to something on NPR. Because if you do the math, like NPR came online in like 72 or 73. And so I'd be like, come on, Dad. He'd be like listening. And then we'd turn on Walter Cronkite after a very long dinner discussing issues. And so we had just a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion. My sisters were much older. They were in college by the time I was 8. So it was just me. And so I was around adults most of the time.
Right, with adult conversations.
And then my father was an orator and a litigator and a legislator. And he dragged me to a lot of Rotary meetings and a lot of talks. And
it's totally different.
And in fact, like this cup, I just have to show this really fast. This cup says 1950s Bill Milligan Toastmasters. So he was born in 23. So this was when he was 17. He got his Toastmasters cup. So I come by this honestly, right? But that's what I did growing up, was hang out with a guy who was a thinker and a writer and a speaker. And was my influence. So in between playing tennis.
That was an influence, but did that, I don't want to say, did you enjoy that? But
I don't know, it just was.
Yeah, it just was. And it just,
they left me alone a lot because my father was 45 when I was born. So like, yeah. If it wasn't during that hour of like NPR to Cronkite to dinner, I played tennis and kind of went to school. I wasn't that great of a student, which I know a lot of people find to be a weird thing to say, but I really wasn't. School was boring to me. So yeah, no, I was a really happy childhood. I was very blessed. We met, upper middle class, and like there wasn't a lot going on. It was just that stuff.
Well, you definitely learned a lot of skills that you could apply to your career right now. That it seemed like it just got almost like a natural progression. It's like, well, it's about, conversing and, Walter Cronkite and stuff like that. That is like one of the top communicators for sure. So you knew what, I guess, good communication looked like, especially being around people that are winners and Toastmasters and things like that, which is.
I don't know if that was a winner, if it was just like an accomplishment cup, I'll call it.
If you have a trophy, you're a winner.
I can't believe I have had it forever, and I never actually read it until like last year. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a Toastmaster. It was pretty cool.
And then you do the math. When did we get this? Oh my God. Yeah. That's so cool. All right. So, building on that, I'll go in reverse order, Ruth. What do you do now to unplug? Are you still going to Toastmasters or are
No.
you,
Well,
pickleball? You mentioned that kind of in passing.
I'll fess up. I've never been to a Toastmasters.
Okay.
I have high regard for Toastmasters. I think they're incredibly important and they fill a niche. And we refer people to them a lot. So that said, I do two things to unwind. One is I play pickleball and work out. I just picked up swimming again. I just joined a gym.
Oh, cool.
And I have really, really enjoyed that. The solitude and the learning. We spend a lot of time working with people on learning to breathe. And this learning to breathe in the pool has become a huge challenge for me to overcome because I'm really bad at it. And so I've kind of pairing those things. But the thing I really do for fun is I do pick up on my family. My sister and my mother were huge seamstresses growing up. My sister was too tall for the clothes that were in the store, so she learned to make her own clothes. She was 10 years older than me. So I saw them on the machines a lot. And in fact, she worked at it's kind of sad. She worked at the predecessor of Joanne, which announced its complete closing this week.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm a quilter. I learned to quilt in October of 2020, and every night I quilt, I do something, whether it's for 20 minutes or I play with fabric or I think about a quilt and I give them all away as gifts. It is one of the greatest joys I have right now to unplug, be creative, because I don't tell anybody what I'm working on or who I'm working on it for. So there's no expectation if it's good or if it's going to be done on time. And there's 9 million combinations and decisions to make, and every time you sit down, and I just find it to be ravenously just creative and reflective and contemplative, and no one else influenced. Like I don't have to talk about it with anybody. Like it's my
I love so
decision.
much hearing that you are making things, like actually making things.
Like
That
go
is
on my
so-
Instagram
so-
feed. You'll see I call them Ruth's imperfect quilts because they are very imperfect.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, we probably won't see the little flaws that are probably glaring at you,
Well,
but
the Amish say you're supposed to make a mistake because nothing can be perfect because there's only one thing in the world that's perfect, and that's God. And
wow.
so I say, well,
There we go.
I got that covered.
There we go.
The other
Anyway,
thing about
that's my and I will talk anyone's ear off for days about the many benefits of working with your hands, with fabric, with the choices and the cutting and the sewing and the finished and the gift, and then knowing that they're all out in the world and I don't have to clean around them. I'm a declutter kind of person too.
I love that. And I love that you kind of gave that little promo for be creative because we need this. And you just really expressed very well how it is important for you.
And I'll just put in one other plug. Every morning I committed to myself this year to do my daily pages. And dare I say, the days I do it, I feel so much clearer. And like, I just have none of the clutter in my head if I spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And that's been a game changer for sure. So
Very
for those
cool.
of you
I've been
that don't,
journaling for like about the past 2 months, and nobody's more surprised than me because I never really stuck with it.
well, and there is the difference between the daily pages and journaling. I never look back at it. I
I
just
don't know
use
what
it.
daily pages then.
Oh, so The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Yes.
We're both like,
So
where's
already-
every one
I
of
think I
us?
got
Let's,
one
all right, let's
too.
find our artist.
actually purposely put it
There
there.
it is. Yeah, I think I have one too.
We highly recommend. I think that so it's just a matter of waking up and writing everything down that's in your brain. It doesn't become anything. It's specifically designed not to become
Well, that may be good
a
for me
product
too.
and making, and it's about clearing your head so that you can be creative. That is the whole premise of it. And there's been, a lot of stuff going on. I have a lot of health issues in my family. I have 2 kids in college. I have, there's a lot going on. And so just being able to decompress all that somewhere. And I don't look back at it. Once in a while, it might become a to-do list. But for anyone that wants to make anything, I highly encourage that practice.
Awesome. I love that.
Hmm.
All right.
I think
Aisha?
it's me. Yeah. Well, okay. So I can build a little bit. When Ruth was talking about the artist's way, daily pages are just one of the tools that she talks about. Another is that she talks about an artist date. And I would say I'm really good at taking myself on certain artist dates, which means you are going somewhere without an agenda, sometimes alone or with just one person, but it is to reconnect with yourself. And for me, that is most likely to happen in nature. As someone who
Mm.
spends a lot of their time listening and expressing, it helps me to get that stuff out of my ears and to just have the sound of nature. I can feel my entire body sort of relax, even if it's just going for a walk in my neighborhood. Like that
Mm-hmm.
just is something that recenters me. I'll also take myself on dates in my house and bake things. I love the fact that you can put something together and it magically rises and becomes something new. The alchemy of baking is great. And it's also really calming for me to spend time baking. And I need someone to bake stuff for. So like if anybody ever wants something to bake or they want to
keep
eat
that in mind.
something, I'm happy to bake.
Our Monday L10s, Catherine, often have Blythe and Acacia's delectables
Yeah,
as a part of our
I
agenda.
completely endorse that idea.
Right?
Yes.
And I like I like how you not only just said, I take a walk or I bake something, you really emphasize the experience that is involved in that. Because I do tell people, take the walk, but yes, listen to, the nature that's happening around you, or hear the wind, hear the birds, feel the stones under your feet, all of that sort of stuff. It is about really plugging into nature. And the same thing with like the baking too. I mean, when you're describing that, I could see the bread rise and I could feel you working with that and all of that. So it is about, all of that tactile, get all the senses working,
Yeah.
get all the senses.
And I'm always a yin and yang person. So those are like when you say unplug, I kind of think of those, but I do spend a lot of time creating theater, and that is unplugging, but it is also a different way of working. I like training, and there's a lot of physical training that you do in theater. And I like rehearsals almost more than performances. I like getting in the room and digging in and trying new things. And in the same way, I feel my body center and relax when I go out in nature. When I go into a rehearsal room or a theater, my body does the same thing. I am at home in those places at this point in my life. So that's also for me unplugging.
And while I'm thinking of it too, a lot of people that perform, both you and Blythe, while you were children, find that being on stage is so very natural for them. So I just want to do a little shout out for all the theater kids out there. If you have become a CEO, maybe your next step is to get on the stage and start performing, with presentations and with things like that, because you're the superstars for it and people want to see
Well,
that.
and can I add, it gives you the skills, but I think it's really important to tell people I am a professional actor. I have done over 60 plays in my career. I know how to be on a stage. I know how to stand on a stage and speak, and I still get nervous. I am intimately familiar with nervous energy. So I just want to make sure people, when they're listening, don't presume that that's something that they can chase out of their public speaking. What you do is by practice, you learn how to work with it and live with it.
That's great to mention, but also too, I'm just going to tag on as well, is like a lot of people, I mean, performing for their family or their friends or something when they were younger was, it brought them so much joy. And I'm like, well, what if you did that now as an adult? Or maybe it is performing in theater. And I know some people who are CEOs that have gone back to that sort of thing. But it's like, well, if you can't spend the time going to theater, do a presentation, because you clearly love being in front of people and you get fed off of that energy. So everybody's got a story.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
maybe you just need to get out there and just start talking about it.
Blythe?
Hey, Blythe, you're up.
So everything that Acacia and Ruth has said has been really mindful, and I am probably the least mindful of the three of us.
Hooray.
So when I'm unplugging, I love to go for a run, but I also have my AirPods in, and I'm listening to a podcast. So it's not just my time to run and exercise, it's also my time to learn things. And as I traveled around the country as a performer, I actually have really site-specific memories of where I was when I heard different podcasts. And I can say, oh, I was walking in Bangor, Maine when I heard that, or I was walking in Monmouth, Maine, or in Asheville, North Carolina when I learned that piece of information. And I can connect back to those podcasts. It's much harder now that I run the same route in my neighborhood in Gahanna, and I listen to different podcasts because they've all sort of blended together. But that's one of the things that I do. I'm also a baker, as Acacia is, and it used to be something that was a really big stress relief for me. And now it doesn't provide as much stress relief, but I still really enjoy the process of picking the baked good, the precise baked good for the person to whom it is being delivered. And I think that part is really, really important for me. But oftentimes the moment when I'm in the kitchen getting it done, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I get to this point where like there isn't enough time?
Oh, that's funny. But I loved how exactly how you kind of explained that, where you pulled out all the elements of joy that you find in some of that stuff. Like, I listened to this podcast that reminds me of this. But if anything, when you were telling that story, I saw that you get a lot of joy out of your own curiosity too, because you like to learn things and you're a learner. And it just like, but if I'm learning something, I'm super happy. And I'm kind of the same way. I'm super curious. And I will, like I said, I'm going to do something super healthy and I'm going to do something at the same, learn something at the same time. How you just have to kind of pair things up to kind of get it all jammed into your day.
Wrong. There's still time spent on the couch consuming television and movies and
mindless streaming. Yes,
me too.
I have had my moments.
This is the first year when I feel like I don't know any of the Oscar Best Picture nominees, and I'm like, how did I get to this place where I have seen so little of this highbrow movie theater film? I don't know.
Catherine, can I just add one thing?
Yes.
If someone asked us, how did we write this book? I said, we were just curious. And I don't mean that as like a flippant. It truly was just one curiosity after another, back to
That's
the question that Acacia said. We had a question, but we were curious. How could we answer it? We were curious what that could look like. We were like, and then I want to put in one other plug, because Catherine and I have a bit of a history together in a different world.
Yes.
And I remember so specifically when you were running your business and I was facilitating the Women Presidents group, and you were one of the few people that like was a diehard traction EOS person. And I also will say that if it wasn't for our L10s, which are Monday morning meetings, and it was your quote, by the way, you have to be dead or on vacation if you miss an L10. That was Catherine's quote. But we would put issues on the list every day every week in small bits that we had to overcome to discuss the book, to talk about a chapter, talk about a story. And none of it felt overwhelming to us. Like we just kept sort of chewing at it in tiny, like how do you eat an elephant? And by the time we were done, we're like, oh, that really paid off for us, because so that curiosity had a place that it lived in the dialogue and conversation between us every week. And that's how we did it together, which a lot of people, you might be asking, but I wanted to play on that for a second because it was a huge part of how it got done.
Well, I thank you for the shout out. I'm trying to get over being so intense of saying you have to either be dead or on vacation.
But it was so helpful to me at the time. It was so helpful.
But I mean, it's kind of like no excuses. And I still kind of hold myself to that standard. It's like, life gets in the way, but you can make that excuse forever. So I love that, using like an analogy as a child, I love that you guys just kept poking this whole idea with a stick the whole time. Just like, what's this? What's this? What happens if we do this? And that just led to something really awesome, and I think something that the world needs. So
we hope people think it's awesome. So
the outcome of it is that we became better coaches as a result. For identifying these threshold concepts.
But I'm willing to bet that this is going to be a really good seller. This is an area, like I kind of said, people may have had joy in younger, that they could easily say, you know what, I would like, I love doing that, but I don't know if I'm a great speaker, or I'm still nervous or whatever. And I'm going to pick up this book and see if there's something that I'm not doing that's going to kind of course correct this, because I want to do more of this public speaking, or more of this performing, or more of this whatever. So I think you'll hit on a nerve with a lot of people that just need to push themselves, or if anything, I want them to tell their story, because I listen to a lot of podcasts as well that are storytelling things, those are the best. It's like, I want to know about people. I want to know how they did it and what their story was. So I think it's super exciting. So congratulations to all of you. It's a big deal.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for all being here today. I will have all your information in the notes so people can get a hold of you and find the book and all the fun things.
May 6th.
and when it comes out May 6th. And are you doing pre-orders though? Yes.
Yes, they're
Okay,
online.
good.
Yes, we
All right.
we are leading the pack of the spring pre-orders apparently,
Awesome.
according to Wiley. So
Oh, well, that's exciting. Okay, well, great. Then hopefully you'll have a few more from this podcast that will also
we
want to
hope
get the book.
we hope. We appreciate both you, Catherine, the topic of this podcast, your speaking, which is excellent, by the way, and the ability to do this. This is actually our first one together. So thank you for being the inaugural host of many conversations that I think we hope to have.
All right, thank you so much. And